All right. Hey, everybody. It's Anthony James Hodell, CEO and founder of the Athletic Scholarship Corporation. And today I've got a actually robust guest here, head volleyball coach over at University of New Mexico, Jon Newman. I know you've got a hyphen in there. I didn't want to butcher it, but I'm going to go with Guncar.
You're very close, Gonchar. Yeah, it's a little
See,
softer.
I was
Yeah.
close. See, um, so give us your, I guess I call it an elevator pitch, just a little background and credibility. Obviously, you've been a major college coach. One of your claims and things that stand out and that I see is that you're honing adults and productive human beings with great GPAs, which is more important than volleyball.
Sure.
But if you could give a Olympic background, I know you've got a robust background, just so the listeners know who you are.
Yeah, thanks, James. Excited to be here with you. The reality we see ourselves as very transformational staff. We see ourselves as coaches and recruiters that, like you said, are trying to be a little bit more than just volleyballs and books. And that probably just comes from my background at six different Division I universities, two Power Four conferences, pretty extensive time with the U.S. Women's National Team, with our senior women's national team, for 2015, 16, 17, and then 18, 19 with in 20 just after COVID with our U20 teams and our U19 team, and then ran just recently the NTDP, so our National Training Team Development Program, U18 level, and so we kind of have this, I guess, very like the word would be, as you said, robust experience with student athletes and with adults in the sport of volleyball, pretty extensively the last 6 to 8 years, heavily with those programs.
So the content of this that we share with high school coaches, parents, student athletes about recruiting. I'm a football guy. I played at every level. In '04, age and injuries piled up, and you kind of go, "What am I going to do now?" I was
Sure.
an entrepreneur and had a tech background and started coaching. And I realized there's a lot more to this. And my coach came to me and said, "You owe us back." And I
Mm.
understood that as an adult of what I took from the sport. And honestly, I talk about it often. It saved my life.
Wow.
Just the camaraderie, the people, the support. Coach is like a second father. You basically hand your child off to a coach and say, take good care. And not all coaches, especially when you get into the revenue generating sports, where your salary is consistent with the revenue the school can afford to have you coach. You coach
Sure.
for the love of the game, not the money. I mean, these guys are in football raking in $3, $4, $5 million.
Yeah.
So this not being a revenue generating sport, in my experience from '04 to date in recruiting, is soccer, volleyball, lacrosse, really club heavy. You get a budget of nothing to recruit. How has, being in this sector for as long as you have, you saw changes, with name, image, likeness. Can you talk a little bit about what you look for in a student athlete and your process at University of New Mexico?
Totally. And I agree with you. I think the landscape is changing, and what we thought we knew 2 weeks ago is even different than what we know today. And the way that different schools are handling it, the way different compliance departments are interpreting some of the rules, can be vastly different, even just within our own conference in the Mountain West. Some coaches are being told X, whereas we're being limited to Y. And so
Mhm.
there's just to give your listeners just some context just of how quickly these things are changing. I know, James, I know you're all over this stuff, and we're all just trying to keep up. And the reality for us is, I think our process it maybe has 5 tiers to it. First, there's identifying athletes, and how do we do that? Cold emails, the transfer portal, international pipelines, different coach contacts in the club world. And that's just the initial identification. So that's phase one. Phase two would be the evaluation. How, can we get out and watch that player play at a regional or a local or a national tournament? Can we watch them on YouTube or Huddle, or the countless various ways that athletes are putting out video? And then number three is, once we identify that the evaluation would be a fit for that athlete, there's the recruitment process. And that's really where we're trying to differentiate. And so, as you said, hey, how do you, as a transformational coach, as someone who says, hey, we're much more than just wins and losses. Wins and losses come. We've had great years. We've had some not so great years. It's just the way that it goes. And you and I could walk into a gym and identify every player that's over 6 feet tall. We could identify every player that jumps high, every player that hits hard. But really where it comes down is there a philosophical, is there a cultural, is there an academic, an athletic fit that matches that athlete back to us? And that's where it goes much beyond just identifying, hey, the physical attributes of a player. There's just so much more that goes into it, in our opinion, because we've talked about, and Anthony, I know you know this, but there used to be this concept, hey, we're just looking for the perfect fit. And I'm moving away from that. What we're trying to find is athletes that aren't, I mean, yes, they need to fit, but we want cultural additions. We want academic additions. We want athletic additions to our program, not players that just can walk in and play at our level. No, that's not good enough, because we want to win a conference championship eventually. And so we need players who are going to elevate and add. And so we're looking at this term additions. And that's where the recruitment process for us is that phase 3. Then phase 4 for us is commitment. And when we make a commitment to an athlete, we make a commitment to develop them as a player. Player development. We make a commitment to them as an academic institution that wants to see them graduate. And then we make a commitment to them for lifelong success. And how do we set them up for that? And so we have a program we do in the off season for that. And then the last piece is retention. And as you know, how and why are players staying at schools? It varies every year. I mean, every single year you're seeing why different players are hearing, why different players are entering. Now we know it in some of the, as you mentioned, some of the sports that are more heavily impacted by NIL and rev share that's coming up, basketballs and footballs. It's happening in volleyball, but the reality is, hey, at the end of the day, we want to retain the players that we commit. And so those are our 5 areas that we really try to hone in on and say, hey, can we find additions, not just fits? I don't want any more fits. I've had enough fits. I want people that come in, and athletes that come in and add to our team.
It's just like when we hire staff or we look at teammates in our organization, is we want someone that challenges and pushes the top leadership. I love someone that comes to me and says, hey, I've got a better idea. Is it okay if we talk about it? I look at them and I go, why would you ask? That's what I brought you here for. I want, and that's what creates a championship culture. You kind of covered your philosophy and your program development and that, your core principles. I'm sure transfer portal has been a blessing and a pain, because I'm sure you get a player that, you checked every box, you did everything you can. And then when you get into a relationship, something happens and they get the mentality of, I'm just going somewhere else. And there's no more, when I grew up and graduated high school in the 90s, we laughed because I saw a yearbook picture the other day where I was a junior in the video room making VHS duplicate tapes. And I was telling the story to people how I had to jump an A-B split and run a master tape and pause it. There was no huddle. There was no digital.
I know those days. Yes.
It was a big bulky package. And back then I shoveled drives, cut grass, worked the job at off season, and I paid about $20 a coach to send a bulky package out and hope they respond.
Sure.
And I think it's easier back then because if you were that kid and you could check the boxes, you had the ability and the passion. Football's different. Football's about what's his upside. What can we get out of him once we put him in a program? And I know you do the same thing because you're looking at the core athletics. None of these kids are truly ready to just go out and play right away. They think they are.
Right. But pretty rare.
I feel like recruiting is tougher from your perspective as a coach because there's so much activity, social, digital, huddle, coaches, email, X. How do you filter through that? Like, do you, personally, do you look at all those? Because I know a lot of coaches at major college football are not managing their Twitter.
Sure. Yeah. Great question. There are a ton of different platforms that athletes are using to reach coaches. And just like you said, the days of getting a VHS or a DVD or a CD-ROM or even we used to get sent some hard thumb drives, that you could plug and play. And yeah, those days are a bit gone from now. But, the reality for us is we do, but I think when we create our recruiting vision and our recruiting plan, it has to include today, the here and the now. And then it also has to include what is happening in 26. Who are we graduating? Who are we projecting to kind of move up our ladder? And then it's, hey, what's happening in 2027? And knowing, hey, June 15th comes around, I've got to be ready to recruit 3 classes at once. You're recruiting your current team. You're recruiting the 25 class, the 26 class. Oh, and by the way, here comes June 15th with another 3,000 volleyball players that want to play college volleyball. And so the answer is it is a full-time operation. My coaches and I, we sit down at least once a day, more formally, and throughout the day, multiple times throughout the day, are there just conversations about player evaluations, player retention of our current players, and then, hey, where does this most recent email that just came in from player A, B, or C, where does she fit in this? Because boy, we really like the way she elevates. We love the way she moves left and right at the net. We love the way she digs if she's a libero or serves. And so we're having these conversations nonstop. And the answer is we are watching it as much as we can. There's just a physical limit at some point, an energy limit that you hit, and you go, hey, this is just too much. There's 40 emails coming in a day, and there's a major qualifier coming up this weekend. There's a major qualifier following weekend. Hey, how are we going to keep all of this in check and make sure nothing slips through the cracks? And so therefore we are checking the email. We are looking at all the various social media outlets that we can. But it does happen, right? I mean, there's not enough manpower in one volleyball office to handle the amount of influx that we get before a tournament. But that is part of my job. And part of my job is to make sure we put together the best possible team we can. So I feel there's an obligation within that opportunity for us to get better.
Now, you've had, I believe I read right, 10 consecutive seasons of 3.4 or higher GPA.
Exactly.
How do you do that?
Yeah, great question. So, Anthony, we said early on that, hey, we're going to be a lot more than just books and volleyballs. We have to be, right? If we're going to be transformational and we truly believe that we're going to try to impact people's lives much beyond wins and losses, then we've got to make sure we set them up for academic success. And so one of the things that we do is we have a weekly check-in with our athletes here. We call it a WIPS, a weekly improvement plan. And the very first thing we talk about that in that WIPS, not only do we cover, hey, how are they doing socially, emotionally, mental health, but we check in on academics, and we have multiple checkpoints throughout the semester where we're just talking about, hey, how's it going? Where do you need help? Do you need to go see a tutor? Do you need to go see an office hour? And if you do, hey, let's get you into practice 30 minutes early, and we'll help you get out of here 30 minutes. Hey, I got to cut out of practice 30 minutes before it ends. Hey, we'll get you out of here. Because it's that important to us. And so we have players doing that throughout the semester. We make a big deal of it when we're on road trips. We intentionally put into our itinerary study hall time and make sure the athletes know, hey, yes, you can go to your room and just chill out if you don't have anything going on, but here in the conference room, it's going to be a pretty quiet study hall, designated space and time for athletes to stay on track, to stay up to speed with their classes. And I think we just make it a living, breathing thing. We talk about academics every single week with our athletes individually and as a team.
I think you're 100% spot on, and it's funny because now I'm 52 years old. I'm grown now.
Sure.
I started this in '04, and I have an impact and the tool and the knowledge of technology back then, which is now dynamically with AI. There's some great tools with AI to get things done if you use it correctly. But I realized as a coach that being in a city and it was a kind of an inner city and more depressed, that these young men are looking for a home and to get out of a situation that they're in, and sports was the only way. So we started this organization to market our own kids. And then we started having schools and ADs come to us going, hey, what are you doing over there? Well, we're getting the name out. We're getting the word out. We're telling the truth. Okay, this kid has these strengths. These kids have these weaknesses. And I think what you said resonates, and it's going to go through as long as time, is that you got to write down your vision and you got to have a plan. And a lot of people go, oh, that's corny or hooky, or you really do need to chart your plan, your success, and visualize it every day. And you really don't realize that until you go through some tough times. And mental health is a whole nother topic. A lot of people, especially growing up in the 90s, it was, men don't cry, men don't have the issues, toughen up. We live in a different world with a lot of signals that these young men and women are processing every day.
Yeah.
And I understand it, and you do, because you're dealing with younger generation. But it is truly okay to ask for help. And they don't like a lot of young men saying that, or it's a different world, the pressure of college, social media expectations, what you see and reflect what you should be and what you're not, and a lot of people go on social media and they don't digest it as a lot of this is just the highlight tape, right? So that leads to this question. I know you look at highlight tapes and they all look good. They all do.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff out there. You analyze, in football, we ask for, when I was in recruiting, is show me the game you are losing. And I
Hmm.
want to see what you do on the backside. So when I'm looking at a receiver, are you blocking still? Are you still going through the
Hmm.
whistle? Are you, even though you're mentally beat, are you that guy? What's your philosophy on evaluating tape?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think you nailed it there. Uh, what does it look like when things aren't going well? And how is it that athlete's responding? And we've actually studied how players stand on the sideline. For example, if you're a libero and you come out, during your middle blocker serve during that rotation, what is that player doing? Is she high-fiving her teammates? Is she coming up to her coach and getting some feedback and checking in on the game plan? What's a middle doing when they come off? What's a three rotation outside hitter doing it? And so the answer is I think the highlight for us, it opens the door. It says, hey, this is what this player is able to do at her best. And for us, we're looking at a couple things right away. Hey, how high above the net is she playing? How fast is she playing? What's her lateral speed look like? And then we're taking that and saying, hey, let's go dive into some of the match film. And so just Anthony, you nailed it. We literally just last night, we started engaging in a recruiting process with a brand new athlete. And we went as a staff and we identified the matches she's played her worst. We have a database of film. And we said, what does she look like there? Is she still going hard? Does she have high effort, high energy, high excitement? Is she enthusiastic? We call that our 4 E's. And our 4 E's, those are our non-negotiables here at UNM. That's kind of my level of interest in a player skyrockets when we say, hey, that player's got the 4 E's, the energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm. They're pursuing excellence. Is she have her 4 E's at 0-0? Does she have it at 15-8 when they were down by 7? And does she have it at the end of the set, even if they're losing? And so the reality is that is how we look at film. It opens a door for us. Of course, nothing replaces a live evaluation. Nothing replaces an
Yeah.
athlete, going to summer camps. And I'm a big advocate for that. I realize that it can begin to look like just a cash cow. But the reality is for a lot of schools, that's the one chance that athlete has to interact with a coach. And so I even say to many of our top recruits, hey, come to camp, even if it's for one day. Hey, you don't have to commit to me for the 3-day camp, the 4-day camp, whatever it is. Commit for one day. Let me work with you. Let my staff work with you. And let's see if you vibe with us, and let's see if that experience matches what you're looking for. Because there's nothing that we won't do at a camp and just say, hey, this is just because it's a recruit camp, we're going to do this extra soft, really, really kind of slow, whatever drill. No, it's going to be game speed. It's going to be full go. And we want to see what kind of player shows up at that environment.
Well, I mean, you coach at the Olympics, so what do they have to lose? They're going to learn something, right? I mean,
We would
that's
like to
part
think
of the
so.
game.
Yeah.
Right.
I was an alternate for the Olympics and I coached in a world championship in 2017. And that's exactly it. When it's the highest level players in the world. There's something to learn from everyone that was a part of that process for sure.
When you look at tape, and in football, we have an answer. It's pretty static, but what's your average watch time where you say, I'm staying and I'm hanging in here or I'm exiting? Is it
I,
literally 5 seconds, 30 seconds? I mean, I know there's
yeah,
a point where you say, hey, and I
yeah,
think what we're leading into is put your best stuff up front, but what do
totally.
you,
Yeah. I think the reality for us is you, if I'm watching your highlight film, there's something in your email that has attracted me, right? You're a 6'3" middle blocker. You're a 6'1", 10-foot touching outside hitter. I'm gonna give it enough time to confirm what it is that I need to see. And then I would say that could be anywhere between, like you said, 30 seconds or 10 to 15 clips, right? Volleyball is a very fast
yeah.
game. So to get 10 to 15 clips of that athlete moving, blocking, jumping, running, hitting, can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 90 seconds. And so if my interest is peaked at that point, I get our staff involved. We begin our fast action response team. We made it our inside joke of, hey, the team is on it. Our fast action response team, we're moving, we're grooving, because we know that players are committing within 24 hours sometimes within the transfer portal, within international markets. There's a great player. She could be on. She could have her video sent out to 350 Division I head coaches in less than an hour. She can get on the phone.
I'm one of the guys that do that. I'm sorry, but
Yeah, no,
I
right.
mean,
The
you,
film.
you have to. You got to do
Yeah,
right by the kid, and
yeah,
the program will survive, and you will find your players. I promise, listeners that you're going to find what fits for you, right?
totally. Totally. And so that's us. That's us. And so we move very fast. It doesn't mean we pressure. I think we've gotten away, Anthony, from that with pressuring athletes. We really want them to feel like it's the right fit. And that's, again, that kind of comes back to this idea that, hey, I'm not, I'll be very upfront. Different schools are going to have different things they're going to offer between NIL and rev share. And the reality is I don't want anyone motivated by that. I want it motivated by, hey, you resonate with the things we're saying. I see yourself playing for us, playing in this program, growing, learning, developing as a player, as a person, as a student. And that's your motivating factor. And if that's not it, then, hey, this isn't probably the right fit. And it's gone both ways. I mean, we've talked to some super high-end players the last 12 months from the transfer portal or internationally that we just said, hey, I don't think this is going to be a great long-term fit. It could work for a semester. Anything can work for 4 months, right? You would like to think. But at the end of that, I want players that want to be here. I want players that want to put in 4 years. And therefore, their research on their back end is just as important as my research on the front end of who they are and what they're about. And that's why I always say, hey, I want to meet your parents. I want to meet your support system. And sometimes that's a grandparent, an aunt, or an uncle that they live with. And that's fine too. I need to meet the people that are going to be surrounding you as your support system, because what we're going to do is really hard.
I think it's crucial to meet the family because you know what you're getting down to the core. And I try to tell the overzealous parents that are yelling at the high school coach that, hey, you are going to be reviewed just as much as your child. And any coach that actually cares about your child is going to understand that they have to deal with you also, and that may not be their best interest as a coach. Yeah. So we tell it like it is here on both sides. We don't put the fluff in. This is about, this is the truth. Yeah. Social media, how much do you go in and look at that when you're looking at character?
Yeah, there's things that you just realize are part of the generation, and you say, hey, this is generationally, this is what's become acceptable. And I don't mean that I turn a blind eye to it. I mean, I think we're aware of it. I mean, I'm not in tune with it. I'm not checking it every day, but I'm aware of it. Right. There's a Google search that happens on every player that we bring in. Just like you're hiring a staff member for, you're the CEO of a great company, you're making sure that your people are checking the boxes to make sure that we don't have something up there that we shouldn't. And if we do, then I think it's we'd like to at least address it and understand it. But we have a pretty, I wouldn't use the word strict policy, but we've got a general rule of thumb that we say, hey, if you're not going to be proud of it in 10 years, if your parents couldn't be proud of what you're about to post, let's think twice. It doesn't mean you can't, hey, I was on vacation, or hey, my friends and I thought this was a funny joke. Hey, just be aware of it. Like, if you're not going to be proud of that in 10 years, or you think that could be pushing the line, then I'm going to ask you to reconsider it. And that's a pretty easy conversation that I can have, that I do have with my team up front on the front end. That doesn't mean we're perfect. I have no idea. There's some things that are blocked. Coaches are, like, I get it. But at the end of the day, we try to do as much research and background as we can on athletes, and that's part of it.
All right. So my claim to failure, and I always ask coaches, when you look at 10 players, what do you think your 1 out of 10 success rate is, where you looked at it and said, this is what I thought I got, and I got it right, where I got it wrong? I've interviewed some major, revenue generating coaches, major legends, and they say, hey, if I'm 4 out of 10, I got a championship program. I think dynamically it's different for you, right? The numbers are different. Yeah,
you got to scale that down, right? Because we're at 15, maybe 16 athletes on a roster, and so, boy, if I only get 4 of them right, I'm updating my resume pretty fast, and my kids have to say bye to their friends. But the reality is I think we miss, and we miss all the time. Not in a drastic way, but I'll tell you where it comes down for us, Anthony, is it comes down to the fact that what you're about to enter in is really difficult. There's a social pressure, there's an academic pressure, there's an athletic pressure, there's an emotional, social, mental health pressure that just comes with being a Division I athlete. And I think where we miss is that maybe we don't. And again, I this could just be me, and I'll accept it if it is, but I think we miss on how glamorous we make it look, when really, hey, you had an exam at 9, you had weights at 6:30, you had practice, and we were coming off of a pretty hard week of travel, but you thought practice was going to be this pretty slow going, low intensity, low impact practice. And hey, by the way, coaches are coming in there to kick some butt today because we got to get better. And then you get home and you realize you have 2 more exams this week. And then, oh, by the way, Friday, we're on the road to one of the incredible Mountain West member institutions. that are good teams. And it gets hard. And so I think maybe that's where we miss is it looks pretty glamorous on social. It looks pretty glamorous on ESPN Plus when your parents are, live streaming a team that you're talking with in the recruiting process. It looks pretty easy, but you have no idea the toll that stuff takes on you. Not after just 6 weeks, after 2 weeks, after double days, and so do we miss, I to give you an exact number, I could give you, on a longer string, it's probably a player or two every 12 months that they're just going, hey, this player is having a hard time. This is going to be a tough run to get through 4 years. And therefore I do think, and you said it earlier, that, hey, is the transfer portal all good? Is it all bad? It's somewhere in the middle. We've had players that hey, decided second year that studying marine biology was their life passion. Well, we're in the middle of the desert, Anthony. We don't have a whole lot of marine biology going on out here. So for her to go into the portal was completely supported, and I appreciated her honesty and respected it. And then we've had players that to be totally fair, weren't behaviorally in alignment with what we want to be about here. And so therefore, I encouraged her to find another program that would fit her needs. And I think that's kind of how we want to use, I wouldn't use the word use it, but it's a tool, it's no different than the tool you use by talking with coaches when you're, out and about and sending emails and making calls. And it's just another recruiting tool.
I believe in the name, image, likeness. I think it's necessary, but it's got to be redone, 100% revamped. I always tell student athletes, you're selling your soul in exchange for this scholarship. It's not easy. I came from a troubled childhood background. The economics weren't there, and I knew football was my way out. I want to get education. If I don't have that education, that's the game changer. Of course, I was like every young man. I'm going to play in the NFL. I was a highly taught, recruit. I was, I got my name out there because of the VHS tapes. I got in the Prep All-American Guide when it was a print book, and I really hustled. And that's the irony. I'm now in this sector, and it's kind of like I think I started it back when I was in high school.
Yeah.
But I remember the military recruiting me. Every day I had a guy from Marines buy me lunch, extra food. And I was a 260-pound kid. I'm eating, right? So I said, I'll tell you what, if I don't get a scholarship, I got to go to the military. I don't have a choice. I want to get an education. Someone needs to pay for it because I can't.
Sure.
So he saw the signing, he saw the cable interview, and he shook my hand. And I said, I'm glad I'm going to play college football. So fast forward, I show up to college, get off of the plane. I'm in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing to do. It looks nothing like the brochure when I went to visit. And the young lady that toured me around wasn't there anymore. And I go, holy crap, this sucks. I wish I joined the military. Literally, that was in my mind during 2 days at 104-degree weather. And that's back when they didn't mandate the water breaks like we do today,
right.
Because of the legalities. But so I guess in closing, what's your future vision just building this program? Obviously, you're going to be there, and you've got, when you're recruiting a student athlete, it sounds like it's 2, 3 years, 4 years. Yeah. It's a long burn. It's an investment on your time. So how does that vision look, for your program in the future?
Yeah. I think we're in an incredible league, and the league is changing, right? Even year to year, you're wondering who's in, who's out, and with all this kind of this restructuring of different conferences. And one of the things that this program, the 3 out of the last 4 years has played in the Mountain West Conference Championship tournament. And so our long-term vision is to find players that want to leave a legacy in the Mountain West Conference, on the Lobo volleyball team, in this program at this university, as incredible students, as incredible players, and earning the right to play for something that matters, right? Winning a championship at any level is a championship. You can't convince me otherwise. I firmly believe that, hey, when you're one of the best teams at what you do, and there's many good teams around you, that is just something you can't take away from somebody. And so we want to fight for that. I think that's our long-term vision, is to continue to bring in players that want to leave legacies. And a legacy isn't just hey, I was on a team. No, it's I added to the team culture. I added to the setting, the libero position, to the outside hitting position, that every player we come into contact with, that we commit here, has a vision that we share with them. And we are very clear with that vision. Now, they can always outdo that vision or underdo, that they can outkick that coverage, so to speak. And so the reality is we want players to just continue to build that with us, and make this, in our opinion, we want to be the best team that nobody's talking about, because that's who we are right now. We're a great team that hey, we've not earned a whole lot of national attention, and we want to go and show people what we can do.
What is your main, I would say maybe 3 to 5 touch points for, when you're addressing a parent or student athlete about this recruiting process? And what are the, 3 to 5 main things that you look at to a successful recruiting journey? And it could be Division 1, 2, or 3. I tell people there's nothing wrong playing 3. There's financial aid, there's grant money, there's different angles. Not everybody's a D1 volleyball player.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I would say the number one for us is communication. We treat our athletes like professionals, and we expect professional communication on the front end and the back end of the process. I think narrowing down what's really important to that athlete. We've had, like I said, we've had an athlete show up and 2 years later decided that, hey, this wasn't the right fit because she wanted to be a marine biologist. And I think getting really selfish with that. Hey, this is what I want. This isn't just to satisfy mom or dad, not having to pay for college, but this is to satisfy what I want. And I think within there's some, once you set that boundary, there's some leveraging you can have left or right, to getting to what you want, if it's scholarship, if it's financial aid packages, however that works for that athlete. 3, I think, being marketable. So, hey, not only am I really good at this one skill, but I can actually do this really well as well. And that's one of our current players we have right now, incredible setter and an incredible attacker. And so she's making us reconsider how we're going to play our, future seasons, because she can do it both. And she's an incredibly physical, talented player, but she got good. She didn't just pigeonhole herself as a setter early on in her career or as a hitter. And I think that's really important, that, hey, middles learn how to pass and play defense. And liberos learn how to set a little bit or hit, within reason. I don't need them to convert to being a 5'7" middle blocker. That's going to be pretty tricky at the Division I level. But for us, players that can do multiple things and that don't pigeonhole themselves. And lastly, you mentioned this, but it is their process. And I am all about having parents involved, because they are the guardian and they are responsible for their young athlete. But it is the athlete's process, and therefore they should be responsible for it. We just got an email from a dad that was pretty heavy email, and I thought, God, I would have just loved to have had that come from the athlete. Hey, I really am passionate about UNM. I love the area. I love the pictures online. But the reality is, it needs to come from the athlete. And when I ask a question, Anthony, I want the athlete to answer it. I don't need the parent interjecting. Maybe they can nudge or kind of help guide the conversation. But when the athlete arrives here for their first year, their parent's not going to be in a single individual meeting I have with that player. And so that player needs to learn how to communicate with me as the head coach. And so yeah, I would think those are kind of some pretty general insights that I would have from my time.
There's 2 blunt truths that you brought up, and most coaches do not cover it. The one that resonates, because when I speak or speak at 4-H's and AD conferences, one of the first things I tell student athletes, and this kind of resonates when I was dealing with a client at school A,
Sure,
that school B already offered, and then I started school A's quarterback, and I said, you got to look, you guys missed, you can check every box on this kid. And the parent from school B said, who are you and how the heck did you cut my kid out of the mix? And I said, well, your kid has to learn how to interview, because as a former player, especially at the quarterback position or leadership position, be in volleyball, whatever, you have to have an aura and you have to have an energy about you. And that starts with verbal and how you carry yourself.
Yeah.
And I said, that's why your kid isn't getting these offers, because he can't verbalize, he can't. And that is a very cerebral, very verbal position. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And so I said, you got to teach him how to speak, how to communicate. So it's interesting you said that, because I say it often and people go, what do you mean? So when I talk to young men or young women, I say, you've got to be able to articulate and communicate. And when you put an email together, use proper grammar. For Pete's sake, use ChatGPT a little bit, use tools. Right. Because the fact, as a recruiter, if you send me correspondence and it's all messed up, it means you have not touched any of those tools to get help. It's okay to make a mistake. We all do.
Sure.
And that's the beauty of this process. And the second thing you touched on, and I tell parents, is when we send out correspondence, we interview the athlete. We do kind of a mini Wonderlic, because we want to know about the personality. Are they going to succeed in a large environment? Because if you go there and never play or fail emotionally, you're going to fail academically.
Yeah.
So we're trying to cover all these bases at one time. But one of the things I said to parents was, they don't want your phone number. Coaches don't want to talk to you. But I'm sorry, with all due respect, they really don't. And that's not being rude. It's just being matter of fact. And then the last thing, if a listener or a coach or a recruit wants to get in touch with your office, is going to the site, doing the questionnaire the best way, or maybe you could give some social accounts on how to follow you and
Sure.
stay in
Yeah.
touch.
You know, I think it's our X account is at Lobo Volleyball, at UNM Volleyball. Forgive me if I kind of screwed that up. I don't have my phone in front of me. My email, you know, I take emails. I don't always respond, but my staff does. You know, I will always take a first look at a player and then I'll forward it to our various departments. So I've got my offensive coach is going to watch setters and middles. My defense coach is going to watch my liberos and my outsides. And so we kind of divide and conquer a little bit with that process and get everybody involved. And just, hey, go lobos.com, go to our staff page. You can find myself, my recruiting coordinator. Yeah, you know, like I said, we are not in a position, and I don't know, you know, I know that some coaches feel differently on this, but hey, we're a service industry. At the end of the day, we have an incredible responsibility to these young people. If you want to be a Division I player and you want to be a Division I middle and you're a 5'6" middle, who am I to tell you you're not allowed to email me? Email me. I'll watch the film. You know, we'll take a look at it. It probably won't be the right fit for us. But I'm in a position that if I can help make a dream come true, we try to, you know, but at the end of the day, there's also a job component that I have a responsibility to for this program. But anyone and everyone welcome to email us anytime. We love hearing from athletes. So thanks for doing what you do.
I appreciate it. And that comment is, I mean, you're like cracking out of the park for me. You're making this really easy for me. You know, I tell student athletes and parents, if you get correspondence from a D3 coach and you think you're D1,
Sure.
It's just like you just said, you treat everyone with respect and humility and gratitude for that connection, right?
Absolutely.
And I always speak that connections are currency. You know, these kids are like clicks and followers, and that's their currency. And I say, in my world, connections are currency. So if Coach Newman, if you were at a local D3 and
Sure.
you reach out to a prospect and say, I really like you, I think you're a D1 prospect, good luck in the process, but they give you the time of day to respond and they're kind to you, guess what happens if Coach Newman's a Division I coach? You're probably contacting that kid. I remember that kid.
Yeah.
When I was a D3 coach, gave me time of day, was respectful, was, humble about my contact. And that's really hard to get across to young athletes today. Everything's D1, D1. We call it mascot chasing in this business. But
Yeah,
I
sure.
think, you treat everyone with respect because you don't know where that person ends or what they need or how you can help each other, in closing. So that was great. I mean, thanks for the content. Thanks for taking the time. And, we'll push this out to everybody. I value your time. I know you're busy and,
Awesome.
keep grinding and good luck. And we'll send some people over.
Awesome.
They won't be the 5-6ers, but they'll be in your wheelhouse.
Well, thank you, Anthony, for your time, and thanks for what you're doing for all these parents. You're putting out a great product, and do keep me posted on any way I can help down the road. Okay.
I appreciate it, Coach.
All right. Thank you.
All right, bye.
College sports is a big business, a multi-billion-dollar business. So how do high school athletes get noticed by college coaches? At Athletic Scholarship Corporation, we provide nationwide recruiting services and get scholarship offers for our clients.